Good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Graham, and I'm the new Chief Development Officer here at the Wolf River Conservancy. I'm still very new to the Conservancy, and there are many donors and volunteers I have yet to meet. However, I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you tonight in this virtual realm, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you in person very soon in the next coming months. Let me welcome you to tonight's lecture series, which is part of our ongoing educational outreach to the community. We're very excited about tonight's program, Mid-South Coyotes. As we get started, I'd like to acknowledge all of our benefactors for 2023. Thank you to the Crawford Howard Family Foundation, AutoZone, FedEx, Hyde Family Foundation, International Paper, Jim Care Subaru, Ring Container Technologies, and Solvamo for their ongoing support. Of course, all of our supporters, corporations, individual donors, and volunteers are all critically important to allowing us to deliver on our mission, the protection and enhancement of the Wolf River watershed as a sustainable natural resource. As always, gifts of any size are appreciated. Please look for the donation link in the chat box. And just a few housekeeping details for tonight. We ask that you do not attempt to record this program with any device. We will record tonight's program, and we will be sending you a link in an email following tonight's program. If you have any questions during tonight's program, please use the Q&A feature, not the chat box, and our educational director, Kathy, will ask questions after the program. Before I introduce our special guest tonight, I'd like to recognize Dr. Phyllis Kennedy, who will be assisting with tonight's program. Thank you so much for your help. And now it's my pleasure to present to you our speaker for this evening, Dr. Michael Kennedy. Dr. Michael Kennedy will talk about coyotes in Tennessee, including their arrival, diet, behavior, and possible conflicts with humans. Dr. Kennedy is a professor of biology at the University of Memphis. His research interests include mammalogy, wildlife and urban ecology, and mammalian systematics. Dr. Kennedy has taught at the University of Memphis since 1974, mentoring dozens of graduate and undergraduate students and inspiring many others. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kennedy to our virtual stage. Welcome, Dr. Kennedy.
Hi, it's good to be with you this evening. Let's talk about coyotes. What do you say? There's a wealth.
I say that sounds great.
How are we doing? Oh, there's a wealth of information concerning the species on the web, in books, magazines, and other places. What I'd like to talk about this evening is kind of my work with coyotes, my experiences with coyotes over the years, and I'd like just to tell you a story. And the story has several parts, and I'll try to go through each part. And if you have questions, let me know. Okay. You have the next slide. I think it's a fascinating story. It's one with a lot of emotion, suspense, uncertainty, science, management, lessons learned, and probably others. Kind of a summary of what I'd like to talk about is the arrival, when the coyote first made it into Tennessee, the concerns that we had, the predictions, the plan, and then what we've learned and what we see is the future. Arrival, it didn't take us by surprise. We saw it coming. It moved from west to east. It crossed Arkansas. I've been asked several times how it got across the Mississippi River, and I kind of laugh. I think maybe it was several ways. Some were probably brought over in trucks or cars and released in the east, but some I think actually swam the Mississippi River, and I'd be willing to bet that some just walked across the Memphis, Arkansas bridges. My story starts about 1976. I was at the Ecological Research Center, University of Memphis South Campus, and some people that are players in this coyote story are Gary Cook and Bob Pugh of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. I think both of those have retired now. Don Osbrooks was one of my graduate students, and myself. The coyote study, the objectives were to determine the distribution and taxonomy of the species in Tennessee. And then to determine population characteristics of age structure, sex ratios, and female litter size. And then to determine the impact of coyotes on livestock and farming practices. A question that we've asked a lot is, why did the coyote expand its range into the southeast? And no one clearly understands why the coyote extended its range in the southern United States. But many explanations have been proposed. However, the following reasons are usually given the most merit. Habitat modification. It was removal of forests for various reasons have provided a habitat very suitable for coyotes. Abundant food supply. There's a rich food supply of native wildlife ranging from rabbits, rodents, insects, songbirds, white-tailed deer, to an array of various fruits. And the absence of the red wolf. There was the marked reduction of red wolves from managed coyotes to invade the southeast. And, possibly some combination of these factors and possibly others may in reality have provided suitable surroundings for the coyote in the southeast. Well, who's coming? We can think about the gray wolf in North America. It could possibly be what's coming to, the North America. It was settled by Europeans in reduced range today. Look at the darker shading in the north and in Mexico. The distribution of the gray wolf was pretty large at one time, but it was much reduced in later years. We look at Hall and Kelson in 1959. They give us a distribution map of the coyote, and you can see in 59 the species covered much of up North America. We into Canada, the far north, the United States, and then into Mexico and probably into Central America. Each of the dots on the map represent the location of a coyote. But if we look at Swartz and Swartz 1995, they give us the distribution of the coyote, and it's pretty much all of North America. It's kind of interesting, the habitat. This is what I initially thought coyote habitat was like. In other words, if we think about the movies and the places that you've seen pictures of coyotes, they're in this kind of habitat. It's either desert or grasslands or prairie. We don't see many trees there. There's a few, but this is what we thought coyote habitat ought to look like. But, the eastern United States has got some areas that look pretty attractive too. We've got bottomlands. We've got a lot of agricultural lands, soybeans, corn, cotton. And this picture in the lower right here, you can see the fence line there with a few shrubs, grassland, a few trees in the back over in McNairy County. And I did a lot of work with coyotes early on in this part of the state. So it's kind of like Tennessee put out a sign that says, "Welcome, come on." Well, we're looking to the southeast. Again, we had coyotes coming from the west. We had coyotes maybe coming from the north, and they were moving east. This is counties with known occurrences of Canis latrans in 2009. And probably every county in Tennessee has some records of coyotes by today. The general references to why coy dogs became increasingly numerous. There was suspicion of potential massive integration between domestic dog genes into wild canid populations, resulting in a highly modified canid populations. And a coy dog now is a cross between a dog and a coyote. What might the coy dog look like? Well, this is what we first saw. I mean, we thought about what's coming. It's this massive animal that looks like it could carry an automobile off, if it wanted to. will it get us? Does it bite? Only if you get too close. Well, again, this is the way that we were thinking about coyotes during this period. It was an animal that potentially was going to do us a lot of harm. I took a lot of measurements from coyote skulls, trying to get at this question of coyote or coy dog, and the top left picture there, looking at the dentition. Coyotes have a narrow skull. Most of the dogs are a little bit wider. There are a few species of dogs that give us a little problem in identification. But the wolf skull at the top there, it's just a bigger skull. And then at the bottom, the dog skull is pretty obvious. It's got that recurved slope on the nasals. And the coyote is, you see the arrow there, it's just a kind of a more of a straight line along the nasals. And then there's the dog with the question mark there. That potentially is what a hybrid could look like. So we've got coyote, we've got a good dog, and then we've got a potential coy dog there. The taxonomic status of the coyote in the southeastern United States, I looked at this early on, and I looked at about 380 animals from Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And about 95% of those turned out to be either good coyotes or good dogs. And only about 5% did I think was a coyote dog hybrid. And then coyotes are seasonal breeders, January to March. A phase shift in the breeding season of F1 hybrids, October to November. So young may be born at a time when survival is difficult in the wild. A decrease in fecundity and fertility among the hybrids was probably a factor here. The average F1 is less fit in various ways for life in the wild than is a coyote. And then a lack of male parental care among the hybrids. And for the most part, coyotes just don't like dogs and avoid them when possible. Well, I think it's an attractive animal. You can see the animal in the lower right there. It's notice the tail. The tail is down, black tip. The ears very pronounced, and that's a coloration there that was pretty common. A couple of animals standing in the upper left there are good representatives of what coyote looked like during this period. I saw quite a bit of variation on the right there. I saw the dark ones, almost black, and then there's on the left there, the almost white. That animal in the middle there, that reddish brown, was the most common color of what the coyote looks like, and it is that is the coyote. I thought that light color phase was really pretty, and I didn't see much of that, but you can see the animal, get a feel for the size. The tail is down, the ears are up. It's just an attractive animal. This is a picture I took out in New Mexico. I was up on a mountain with a telephoto lens, and I got a shot of this animal. Look at the tail, look at the legs, look at the ears. There wasn't any question in my mind, but that's a coyote. That's what a coyote looks like in the distance. Coyote pups, the upper left there. I found some coyote pups, and I brought them into Memphis, and I raised them in my backyard. And you can see the coyote there, and then you can see the pups to the right there as to what they look like. Well, think about the tracks, and I'd like for everybody to get comfortable with the tracks, because this is what you see when you're out on the trails and so forth, that you can see that the wolf track is much bigger. The dog track is kind of rectangular. The coyote track is more oval. And you look at the tracks. Look how the pads set, and get that feel in your mind, and look for that when you're out on the trails and so forth. One of the programs or the procedures that I used to kind of test if coyotes were present or not is what's called a scent station analysis. And it's just put up a circle of sand that's a meter across, and I've got a popsicle stick that the cotton ball goes in the top of the stick there. And I use bobcat urine for the most part. That it was pretty easy to find. And the tracks that I've got there, I don't see any coyote tracks, but I've got deer tracks there in the lower right, and maybe a raccoon track on the upper part of the right side of the screen there. But a scent station analysis, this is something that anybody can use. And if you just, if you're wondering what might be getting into your chicken pen or your barn or whatever, this scent station is a way to get at that. The track, it's it looks something like this. It's a long, narrow track that's about 2.5 inches, I think, in length there, and the width a little less than that. I looked at when coyotes first started showing their or making their appearance here in Western Tennessee. I looked at a lot of animals like this, and people would put them in the back of the truck, bring them in, and asked me to identify the animal. And this is a good coyote here. And you can see the tail, the coloration, and that kind of thing. A ratio that I measured the tooth row length and the width in between the tooth rows, and I divide the small number into the big. And I think about 3.5 is what I call for the coyote. If it was 3.5, it was a coyote. If it was less than that, it was probably a dog. The measurements, the males were bigger than the females in all the external measurements that I took. Total length, you can see there that the male's about 1255 and the female's about 1203. This is in millimeters. The tail length's about 344. The female's about 320. Hind foot length in the male's about 201, and in the female's 190. And the ear length is about 103 in the males and about 98 in the females. So the male, again, is bigger than the females. The average weight for the male was about 31.1 pounds, and then the range was about 21 to 41. There were some large animals out there. For the female, it was about 25.1 pounds with a range of 15 to 32. The age structure, I looked at about 48 males and about 55 females, and the average age was about 2 for the males and about 1.7 for the females, with a range of about 1 to 6 for the males and about 1 to 5 for the females, and less than 3 years old. About 88% of the males were less than 3, and about 91% of the females were. The age is the same way that you'd age your dog, just based on tooth wear. And you can look at this picture, and you notice on the incisors, the notch to the right and to the left. If the tooth is worn down that far, it's about 5 years old. And I saw a few that were up in the older age classes, but not many. Population estimates, in other words, what's our density? Well, in 1986, I looked for density or calculated density on an area where I had 34 individuals. And it was about 0.35 calories per kilometer squared, or 1 calorie per 714 acres. In '89, in another study, I looked at a site. It had 55 animals with a density of about 0.5 calories per kilometer squared. And it was about 1 calorie per 435 acres. And then in 1990, on another site, I looked at 49 individuals, or calculated 49 individuals, and had about 0.5 calories per kilometer squared, or 1 calorie about every 500 acres. In the western states, we had about 0.5 to 1.0 calories per 640 acres square mile. I looked at home range. That was what was the movement patterns of coyotes like, and we put radio collars. We snared animals, put radio collars on them. This animal is just knocked out. We're putting a radio collar on it. We'll let it come up on its own and take off. Well, this is one of my graduate students that worked on coyotes. He's radio tracking coyotes, and he got a handheld receiver and an antenna there, and he's wearing earphones. And sometimes the conditions are good, and sometimes they're pretty rough. There's quite a bit of snow in Shelby County one of those years. But we calculated the home ranges, and each of the circles, or the configurations, represents the home range of an animal, and you can see that they overlap quite a lot, and some of them are pretty large. The male home ranges, annual home ranges, was about 12 square miles. The female was a bigger home range, about 23 miles squared. With the range for the male was about 5.4 to 16.6 miles squared, and then in the female about 18.5 to 27.4 miles squared. I was interested in movement patterns. And I caught a couple of animals up on the Gibson and the Carroll County line there, and I put radio collars on them and turned them loose. And one of them took off and wound up over in Benton County, and then another one took off and went down into McNairy County, and those movements were pretty good distance. We use satellite telemetry to monitor coyotes in Western Tennessee. Gary Cook and Alan Houston. Gary was with TWRA, and Alan Houston was with the Ames plantation, and John Willett was one of my graduate students and myself. And we radio tracked coyotes, and this was a nice way to do this. I just set it home on my computer and let the satellite feed me information, and I'd know what the animal's doing and that kind of thing. But one of these animals, 11-294, I called it over on the Ames plantation, and it stayed around on Ames from about 2 to 12, for about 10 days, and then it took off. It went down near Pocahontas, it traveled about 21 miles, and then it went to Corinth, Mississippi, traveled about 24 more miles. Then it was near Selmer, 22 more miles, and stayed around Selmer for a while, and then went over to Raymer, and wound up near Silerton, which was a 21-mile trip from where I'd last recorded, and it disappeared after Silerton, and either it took off or it was killed or something. But the movement pattern looks something like this. You can see on the screen. It moved east down into Mississippi. It stayed down there for a while. It moved up. It made a little loop, and then it moved on up, and it's further up in Western Tennessee there. The sex ratio, it's about even. I looked at 49 males which was 48% of what I looked at, and 55 females, about 52% what it looked like. So almost 1-to-1. The litter size, I did this with placental scars, and I looked at some. The black marks are in the uterus there are placental scars, and this tells me that this animal had a litter of 5, and the reported average is about 5 to 7, 3.4, 3.9, 3.7 are some numbers that I estimated. The parasites, helmet parasites recorded for 267 coyotes from Tennessee. And I was very much interested in coyotes, and we had a parasitologist in our department that was interested too. And he identified dog heartworms, common roundworms of North America, dog whipworms, dog hookworms, canid felid roundworms, and dog rabbit tapeworms. Those were the most prominent parasites. And the diseases, and we had some help with from different agencies in identifying the diseases, but we had distemper, parvovirus, mange, and rabies was less common. And as far as what coyotes were feeding on, I looked at stomach contents and intestinal contents of every animal I could, and then we picked up a lot of scat off of the road and that kind of thing. And I'd open up the stomach and intestine and see what's there, and I'd go through the scat. And this is kind of what I'd see in the upper left there. You can see the persimmon seed. You can see I think the arrow there is pointing to a short-tailed shrew, and there's a lot of flesh that's ground up there. And then in the lower right, I see some tinfoil there that kind of tells me that the animal might be picking up trash. I see some meat, but I see the dog collars there too, and that tells me that he picked up the dog collar somewhere. It could have been a dead animal, hit by a car or something like that. But the foods, it include rodent, insects, birds, deer, rabbits, fruits, amphibians, livestock, reptiles, poultry, and any food that it could pick up on the highways or in the roads or the trails, they would take. But kind of, if I think about our meal, steak and potatoes would kind of be a main course, with side orders of corn and peas and kraut and beans and that kind of thing. But what about coyotes? Well, the main meal for coyotes would be something like rabbits, mice, and I saw a few watermelon patches that coyotes did a lot of damage to. That they'll eat peaches, strawberries, grapes, and wild fruit was a main food. And persimmon. Now I'm sure many of you have tasted persimmon. I like persimmon. But it was one of the main food items that I found in coyotes. Rabbits, when coyotes first started moving in, we had a lot of concern about, will rabbits disappear? And, what we saw was that rabbits didn't disappear. Coyotes took a few, but we still have rabbits. And quail was bobwhite quail was another species that we had a lot of concern about. We were afraid that coyote might just really destroy our quail populations, but that didn't happen either. And coyote's a good predator. He took a few chickens, he'd take a few ducks, he'd take a few birds if he could get to them, and that kind of thing. And as far as small mammals, Coyote, the deer mouse there, Permiscus would take a lot of those, and that's a forest mouse. The hispid cotton rat is a grassland species that coyotes get pretty hard, and the prairie vole is another grassland species that the coyotes fed on quite a bit. And as far as management, we were concerned about the problem individual. And few studies of stomach contents of coyotes are from studies of stomach contents of coyotes in Missouri as well as elsewhere in the range. Coyote depredation on livestock and poultry are believed to be confined only to certain individuals that compose about 1/4 or less of the population. And the database for coyotes, it includes information relating to. I mean, we've done a lot of work with coyotes. We've got the description down good. We know a lot about the taxonomic status, the field identification. We can handle the distribution. We know a lot about the origin where the animal came from. We know a lot, weight and age. We've got good data. Densities, we've got good data. Home range, we've got a lot of data on litter sizes. We've done well there. Parasites, we've done okay. The movements from one place to another, we feel like we've got that under hand. The dens, the tracks, the foods, we feel pretty comfortable with. So we've got a lot of information on densities. And the coyotes, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that the coyotes here to stay. Most early fears of depredation never materialized. We've learned that we can live with the animal, and we're going to have problems, but the problems will be spotty and in most cases manageable. They can be a challenging source of sport. Well, coyote control, the impossible dream. Large-scale coyote programs based on inadequate foundation are doomed to fail, and they do. What we know is that the coyote is a valuable member of the wildlife community. It's a top-level predator. It feeds on rodents and helps prevent the damage that these abundant animals might otherwise cause. It kills and eats old, sick, or injured animals. And then as a scavenger on dead animals, both wild and domestic, it helps clean up the fields, the roads, and fields, the woods, and the roads and highways as well. Coyote fur is durable and attractive and is a valuable pelt for some markets. And as a sport, coyotes can be hunted with dogs and called with a decoy. We can consider control and management. The things that we need to think about is to remove the carrion. Coyotes are attracted to animal remains and may try to kill individuals. This also may reduce disease transmission. So we remove the carrion. Improve animal husbandry techniques. It was allowing cows, especially heifers, to remain unattended in remote pastures and at calving time is poor husbandry. Pigs and young goats on open range also are subject to coyote predation. In general, only limited control of local coyote populations is possible with mechanical methods as they're currently used. And then traps are the most useful single method available for depredation. And with rare exception, leg hold traps are then the most effective type for capturing coyotes. And we caught a lot of coyotes in leg hold traps. In specific cases, calling with a predator call and shooting or the use of snares made of flexible wire cable can be highly successful. Instances where coyotes crawl under or through fences to prey on domestic livestock or in their regular movements pass through such openings are very applicable to the use of snares. And we used a lot of snares, and we did very well in catching coyotes with that kind of technique. In the past, coyote populations have been checked by poisonous campaigns in certain parts of the United States. But this method has its limitations because it destroys other animals, such as valuable pelts, livestock, and many other non-target species. Those indiscriminate poison campaigns are just irresponsible acts. As a control measure in the past, bounties have been paid for coyote pelts. In general, these have proved ineffective. Because certain coyotes develop a habit of damaging livestock and poultry, control to be effective should be directed toward those particular troublemakers and not the population in general. And bounties were tried in some areas, and they just didn't work. All right, they just didn't work. Damage control is more effective, selective, and safe under all conditions when carried out by trained personnel in the field. Farmers, ranchers, and others who suffered livestock losses should take advantage of trapping and other information provided by the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Although coyotes kill some livestock and poultry, they're often blamed unjustly for the large amount of damage done to domestic livestock by free-running dogs. Selective control is based on securing as much information as possible for each case of depredation and selecting the control tools that are most suitable for each set of conditions. Control of coyote damage requires understanding of basic coyote biology and behavior. With the lack of success of coyote control programs is not difficult to understand. The major problem is that most control programs have not been successful because of the basic failure to gather information, and programs with inadequate foundation are doomed to fail, and they do. And what's the future? Well, I thought about coyotes early on, and it did well. What would you predict the future would be? Well, I predicted and others that we'd see the coyote in the urban areas, and that has happened. We've got coyotes, in most major metropolitan areas of the United States, really. And you can see, what's the suitable habitat that's there. The coyote's just it's an attractive animal. It does well, and it's going to be with us. And kind of what's the next step for the coyote? And it's a clever animal. It's a beautiful animal. It's adaptable. It's here to stay. And we're going to see coyotes in just about every habitat that we've got, I think. I'd like to acknowledge the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, the Milan Army Ammunition Plant, Ames Plantation, University of Memphis, and people of the region. They all played a role in the story of the coyote in Tennessee. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Let me get my video on. Okay, well, great. Well, while I wait for a few folks to put some questions in the Q&A box, I am going to ask you a couple. In presentations I've seen you give on the coyote before, you have talked about some of the conflicts that people might have in urban areas with coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
You have, for example, their pets, and the fact that coyotes are opportunistic hunters. Thought maybe you'd like to say something about that.
Well, if you have coyotes in the area, if you've seen coyotes or people are talking about coyotes in the area, you need to bring your pets inside. or if they're outside, then you should be with them or have somebody with them. But if if we've got coyotes in the area and we just let pets run wild, there's the potential for losing your pets, or a lot of damage done to them equally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I've got 3 questions. Let me those up here. How can a Memphis citizen help in preserving the coyote?
How can citizens help preserve the coyotes
Yes, in Memphis.
in Memphis? Well, that's kind of a tough question. We I think we do best by not leaving food out that they can readily get to. If you're going to feed coyotes, and you're potentially causing some alarm within the community. You may be a real friend of the coyotes and want to help them and feed them and those kind of things, but your next door neighbor may not be, and they have the potential to cause conflicts within the community. And your best bet is not to try to feed them. Let them care for themselves.
So maybe preserving habitat might be a good way to help
Yes.
coyotes. Yeah.
Yes, and there's a lot of good urban habitat, but you've got to keep in mind that there's a lot of people that don't want that coyote inside. And if I walk my pet through the park or something, there's a coyote there, I'm exposing, or I'm tempting the coyote to do something that you don't want the animal to do in regard
Right.
to a pet. Okay.
Is there a hunting season in Tennessee? And I assume that means a coyote hunting season.
No, there is not. No.
But is it, I guess I would follow up by asking, is it legal to shoot coyotes?
Yes, I think it is. But if I have those kind of questions, what I would do is just call the TWRA office in Jackson, Tennessee, and ask them. They've got a toll-free number that you can call, and you can ask any question in regard to wildlife, and they've got the updated material. They can answer your questions, and you can be sure that you're on safe ground or strong ground. Okay?
Right, that's a very good idea.
And that's better than asking me or you or anybody.
Right.
Call the agency that oversees our wildlife.
Yeah.
Because things do change. They do
That's
change.
right. Regulations change, they do. Okay. Did the coyote pups that you raised in your backyard become friendly to you?
Well, I didn't try to make them friendly. That what I tried to do was to I didn't keep them very long, and I fed them in a way that I didn't spend any time with them, and I tried not to make them friendly to me. Okay,
So they could go back in the wild. Yeah.
that's right. Mm-hmm.
Lana wants to know, what is the average litter size? And the book Coyote America mentions litter sizes going up into the teens when many members of a pack are killed.
Yeah, but I've seen literature of litters as large as 17 and that kind of thing. But the litters that I looked at here were much smaller. That 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, not any more than that.
I see. Are coyotes nocturnal?
Yes, for the most part, but you'll see them in the daytime sometimes equally as well. And that's something that I think that's going to be interesting in the urban environment to see how often coyotes are observed moving in the daytime. Okay, I mean, it's a nocturnal species, but it's going to move when it's safe and when there's food available and that kind of thing.
Okay, this is a comment from my friend Mo Bagwell. Hi, Mo. You have reaffirmed my understanding of coyote populations and what I need to do to protect my livestock and pets. And thank you for sharing.
Good. I
Yeah.
hope I've helped.
Here's another question. What is the relationship between the coyote and deer and coyote and bobcat?
Well, I mean, the coyote will run deer, and certainly that's something to consider. But you know, the deer's pretty quick, and moves out pretty good. I think the coyote impact on the deer is going to be animals that are maybe wounded or and get out of sight from the hunter. That animal is likely to be found by a coyote. Those kind of situations.
How about coyote and bobcat? What interactions would they have?
I think they just tolerate one another and don't pay much attention. I've been in the woods in a deer stand, and I've seen a bobcat walk through, and I've seen coyotes walk through, and it's not like one's chasing the other or those kind of things. I think if they do come up on a food source that they're both interested in, there may be a little conflict there, but I don't think that happens very often.
Is there any archaeological evidence for the presence of coyotes east of the Mississippi River prior to the modern era? Great question.
East of the Mississippi River prior to the modern era, not as far as permanent residents. All right, there may be cases where there's been an animal brought in or a few animals brought in for various purposes, but the population really built as the coyotes began to make that eastern movement and cross the Mississippi River and colonize the eastern United States.
And did that coincide pretty much with the extirpation of the red wolf in this area?
Well, the red wolf was pretty much already gone. When we tried some introduction with wolves over in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in the east, and they just didn't take.
Yeah, was that my understanding was that was partly due to interbreeding with the coyotes. Is that true? That the red wolves interbred?
Well, I mean, they can potentially interbreed, but to my knowledge, there wasn't a lot of that.
Okay. Oh, and we've got Linda Lyles has said TWRA says coyote season is year round and no limit. Okay. Probably still
that pretty much sums it up.
Okay, wait, let me read this question, make sure I understand it. What would they, I think it means what is the benefit of the coyote? And are you saying they are more challenging than beneficial?
Well, coyote will eat rodents, and in urban areas we have lots of concern about rodents, and in the fields sometimes the cotton rats and those kind of species that coyotes they may keep those populations down as well. So some of what they do does benefit us in some ways.
Right. Well, and we don't have, it's one of the top predators. We have a whole lot of the mesopredators, as you call them, but raccoons and things. But I'm thinking the coyotes are valuable just for their in addition, just for their role as a top predator, help
Yeah.
balance things out in the ecosystem.
Well, if a coyote finds a raccoon hid out on the road or the trail, it will consume it. Okay.
Yeah.
And if it's hungry, it might take on a raccoon, you know, in a battle some way for food. But it usually takes the easiest, most abundant food source.
Mhm. Have parasites in domestic dogs seen a bump since coyotes arrived, or the other way around?
Do what now?
Have parasites in domestic dogs seen a bump since coyotes arrived, or the other way around?
I really don't know. I really don't know that much about the parasites in dogs and what kind of trouble that people have with dogs. We just take ours to the vet, and the vet handles all of that.
Yeah. Okay. I have always heard that coyotes hunt in a pack in the West, but not in the East. Is this accurate?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I've seen lots of coyotes in the pack. Uh, I've done quite a bit of work out west, and I've looked at coyotes, and coyotes travel together. But most of the time, when they're traveling together, it's a family of coyotes, and it's not a lot of separate individuals. In other words, it may be mom and her 3 or 4 in the litter, and they're in a line. And I've seen that several times in the western states, but I've not seen it in the east. But the visibility in the east is not as near as good as it is in the west. Okay.
I'm going to follow up on that question. So, do coyotes hunt in a coordinated manner the same way that wolves do, or
No.
they don't?
No.
Okay.
Again, the pack of coyotes is usually a family group. It's not a bunch of individuals that have come together just to hunt.
Okay, got it. Can you tell the difference between dog and coyote feces or scat?
Well, it depends on what they've been eating. And in some dogs, I'm sure you can because of the size of the scat and that kind of thing. But a dog of equal size to a coyote, just the poop would be, for me, I'd have trouble telling it apart. Trappers probably can handle that kind of question.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I'm thinking dogs, at least the food that my dogs eat doesn't have a bunch of hair in it, so maybe that would be part of it.
Get that Purina dog food.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, I think, let me see. I think that we have, no, we've got a couple more. Here's one. Have coyotes in Tennessee reached carrying capacity, and do they eat armadillos?
Well, some parts of the armadillo is hard to get to. But yes, I think coyote would take on an armadillo. And yeah, but again, the armadillo's got pretty good protection. It just crawls into the shell and waits it out.
Yeah.
If the coyote catches it out running, it's got a chance to kill it and to eat it, and it would. Okay.
Yeah. And have coyotes in Tennessee reached carrying capacity?
I think it has in some areas. I mean, in some areas, coyotes have been here a long time now, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the urban environment and what the story of the coyote is going to be in a few years in the big cities.
Mm-hmm.
Coyotes are in most of the major cities. They're in all the major cities in the United States. In some cities, Chicago is a good example. They've been working with coyotes there for 20 years, for a long time. Okay.
And would you say that the usual human coyote conflict is just pets? The problem with the coyotes eating pets, or are there other conflicts I'm not aware of?
No, it's we feed. You do things like you feed your pets outside. You put the feed bowl out in the yard, and that just kind of invites the coyote to come, and he'll do that. All right, but if you secure your feeding of your pets and those kind of things, good help. Coyotes are good climbers, and you can build fences, but you need to be cautious about the kind of fence you build, and be sure it's one that coyote can't climb, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. And I'm going to ask one more question because I know it's on some people's mind. There have been reports of coyotes attempting to get to small children out west. I haven't heard of that happening east of the Mississippi, but I wanted to get your comment on
Well, there,
things like that.
there's been reports of that in some places, but it's kind of isolated cases, and I mean, there's some cases in the literature of coyotes harassing children and that kind of thing. And the smart thing to do, if you've got coyotes in the area, don't let your kids go out by themselves. If they're not big enough to take care of themselves, walk with them, or be sure somebody is with them until you're convinced that there's no potential damage that the coyotes can do to your family and so forth.
Good advice. Good spot to end on. I want to thank you so much, and Dr. Phyllis Kennedy as well for your time tonight. This has been really interesting. And of course, you're one of my favorite teachers anyway, Dr. Kennedy.
Well, thank you. But we'll see what things look like in 10 years. And the young people that are out there now, that they can think back to, this is what the coyote situation looked like back there in about 2020 or so forth. What does it look like today?
Right.
Is it worse? Is it better? Or is it just something that we're not concerned about anymore? We'll just have to see.
Yeah, it's sure to be interesting. Thank y'all so much, and have a wonderful evening. I'll send you a thank you note tomorrow. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening.
Enjoyed it.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Bye.